Question 1. Examination of the data shows that an administrator is tasked with implementing a new set of security policies within Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one across a large enterprise. The organization has diverse client groups, including standard user workstations, critical servers, and development environments, each with potentially different security requirements and operational constraints. The administrator needs to ensure consistent baseline security while allowing for necessary exceptions. Which approach to policy management within SEP-12? One is most effective and professionally sound for this scenario. Option A. Implement a broad, permissive policy at the domain level and then create specific, restrictive policies only for the most critical server groups. Option B. Define a comprehensive baseline security policy at the domain level and then create and apply more specific, overriding policies for groups with unique requirements, leveraging SEP's policy inheritance. Option C. Apply a single, highly restrictive security policy to all clients within the domain to ensure maximum security coverage. Option D. Create a multitude of highly granular policies, each tailored to a very specific client group, even if those groups have similar security needs. The correct answer is B. Define a comprehensive baseline security policy at the domain level and then create and apply more specific, overriding policies for groups with unique requirements, leveraging SEP's policy inheritance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise security administration, balancing the need for granular control and efficient policy management with the risk of misconfiguration leading to security vulnerabilities or operational disruptions. The administrator must navigate the complexities of Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP-12. One's policy structure, specifically the inheritance and application of policies across different levels of the management hierarchy. The professional challenge lies in accurately assessing the impact of policy changes on diverse client groups and ensuring compliance with internal security standards and potentially external regulatory requirements. Though for this exam, we focus solely on the SEP-12. One framework. A misstep can lead to widespread security gaps or unnecessary administrative overhead. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and layered strategy for policy deployment. This begins with defining a baseline policy at a higher level of the hierarchy, e.g., the domain or a broad group, that enforces essential security controls applicable to all endpoints. Subsequently, more specific policies are created and applied at lower levels, e.g., specific departments or server groups, to address unique requirements or exceptions. This method leverages SEP's policy inheritance, ensuring that all clients receive the foundational security settings while allowing for targeted adjustments. This is best professional practice because it promotes consistency, reduces the likelihood of conflicting policies, and simplifies troubleshooting. It aligns with the principle of least privilege by applying only necessary exceptions and ensures that critical security functions are universally enforced. Incorrect approaches analysis. Applying a single, highly restrictive policy to the entire domain without considering specific group needs is an incorrect approach. This fails to acknowledge the diverse operational requirements of different client groups, potentially leading to performance issues or blocking legitimate business functions. It is professionally unacceptable because it demonstrates a lack of understanding of the client environment and can result in significant operational disruption, undermining the overall security posture by creating user workarounds. Creating numerous highly specific policies for every single client group, even those with identical security needs, is also an incorrect approach. This leads to an unmanageable policy environment, increasing the risk of misconfiguration, making updates difficult, and consuming excessive administrative time. It violates the principle of efficient administration and can introduce errors due to complexity. Applying a broad, permissive policy at the domain level and then attempting to layer restrictive policies only on specific groups is an incorrect approach. While it might seem to address specific needs, it creates a weak baseline security posture for the majority of clients. This is professionally unacceptable as it prioritizes flexibility over fundamental security, leaving a large attack surface exposed and potentially failing to meet even basic security compliance standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a hierarchical and iterative approach to policy management. This involves understanding the organization's security objectives, identifying distinct client groups and their specific needs, and then designing policies that reflect this structure. Regular review and testing of policy changes in a controlled environment before broad deployment are crucial. The decision-making process should prioritize security, manageability, and operational impact, always aiming for the most efficient and effective security posture. Question 2. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in application load times and user-reported system sluggishness across the organization after a recent Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policy update. The IT security team needs to identify the root cause and implement a solution that maintains a strong security posture while improving system responsiveness. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Roll back the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policy to the previous version without further investigation, assuming the update was the sole cause of the performance issues. Option B. Increase the hardware specifications of all endpoints to compensate for the perceived performance impact of Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 without investigating specific policy configurations. Option C. Systematically analyze the resource consumption of individual Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 features, such as real-time scanning, intrusion prevention, and firewall rules, correlating this data with the observed performance degradation to identify specific policy elements causing the bottleneck. Option D. Immediately disable the intrusion prevention system, IPS, component of Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 on all endpoints to reduce system overhead and assess if performance improves. The correct answer is C. Systematically analyze the resource consumption of individual Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 features, such as real-time scanning, intrusion prevention, and firewall rules, correlating this data with the observed performance degradation to identify specific policy elements causing the bottleneck. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the potential for performance degradation. Administrators must make informed decisions about Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP, configuration that impact user experience and system stability, while also adhering to organizational policies and potentially regulatory requirements for data protection and system availability. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the impact of different SCP features on system resources and understanding the trade-offs involved. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven evaluation of SCP feature impact on system performance. This aligns with best professional practices for IT administration, which emphasize proactive monitoring, impact assessment, and informed decision-making. Specifically, it requires understanding the resource consumption of various SCP components, e.g., real-time scanning, intrusion prevention, firewall, and correlating this with observed performance metrics. This methodical approach ensures that security measures are effective without unduly compromising operational efficiency. While the exam syllabus for 250-315 administration of Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 does not explicitly cite specific U.S. regulations, the principle of due diligence in system administration, which is a cornerstone of IT best practices and implicitly supported by general data protection and cybersecurity frameworks, mandates such a rigorous evaluation. This ensures that the organization's IT infrastructure is managed responsibly and securely. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling critical security features without a thorough understanding of their impact or necessity represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, disabling intrusion prevention system, IPS, or real-time scanning without a documented risk assessment and compensating controls could violate an organization's duty of care to protect sensitive data, potentially contravening principles found in general data protection regulations that require appropriate technical and organizational measures. Similarly, making broad, sweeping changes to SCP policies based on anecdotal evidence or without performance baselines is unprofessional and increases the risk of unintended consequences, such as security vulnerabilities or system instability. This lack of a structured, evidence-based approach undermines the integrity of the security posture and exposes the organization to unnecessary risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach performance tuning and security configuration by first establishing baseline performance metrics. Then they should implement changes incrementally, monitoring the impact of each change on both security effectiveness and system performance. This iterative process, supported by documentation and clear justification for each decision, is crucial. When faced with performance issues, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the specific symptoms and scope of the performance problem. 2. Consulting SEP logs and performance monitoring tools to pinpoint potential causes related to SEP. 3. Researching the resource implications of different SEP features. 4. Testing configuration changes in a controlled environment before widespread deployment. 5. Documenting all changes, their rationale, and their observed impact. This structured approach ensures accountability, minimizes risk, and promotes efficient and secure system operation. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that a mid-sized financial services firm is preparing to deploy Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one across its network to enhance its cybersecurity posture and meet increasing regulatory compliance demands. The IT security team is tasked with ensuring the implementation is effective, minimizes disruption to critical business operations, and adheres to industry best practices for data protection. Given the sensitive nature of financial data, a robust and well-managed deployment is paramount. Which of the following approaches best balances security efficacy, operational continuity, and regulatory compliance during the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12? 1. Implementation. Option A. Implement the most aggressive intrusion prevention and firewall policies available in Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1. Across all endpoints without prior testing to proactively block all potential threats. Option B. Prioritize the deployment of only signature-based virus definitions, disabling other protection technologies like intrusion prevention and behavioral analysis to simplify management and reduce potential conflicts with existing applications. Option C. Deploy Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one with default security policies across all endpoints immediately to ensure maximum protection from the outset. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and network vulnerability scan, followed by a phased pilot deployment to a representative subset of users and systems, with continuous monitoring and iterative policy refinement before a full rollout. The correct answer is C. Deploy Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one with default security policies across all endpoints immediately to ensure maximum protection from the outset. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Implementing Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 12. 1. In a regulated environment presents a significant challenge due to the inherent need to balance robust security with operational continuity and compliance. Organizations must ensure that security policies, while effective, do not inadvertently disrupt critical business processes or violate data privacy regulations. The complexity arises from the need to understand the specific threat landscape, the organization's risk tolerance, and the technical intricacies of SEP's various protection technologies. A misconfiguration can lead to either security vulnerabilities or operational downtime, both of which have serious financial and reputational consequences and can lead to regulatory scrutiny. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased and risk-based deployment strategy. This begins with thorough discovery and assessment of the existing IT infrastructure and its vulnerabilities. Subsequently, a pilot deployment in a controlled, representative segment of the network allows for real-world testing of SEP policies and their impact on applications and user workflows. This iterative process, coupled with continuous monitoring and adjustment based on pilot feedback and threat intelligence, ensures that the final deployment is both effective and minimally disruptive. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, which are implicitly required by regulatory frameworks mandating due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. The focus on testing and validation before full rollout demonstrates a commitment to responsible implementation and adherence to principles of least privilege and defense in depth, which are foundational to many compliance standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying SEP with default settings across the entire organization without prior assessment or testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Default configurations are rarely optimized for specific environments and may not provide adequate protection against emerging threats, thus failing the duty of care to protect data. Furthermore, they might introduce unforeseen compatibility issues with critical business applications, leading to operational disruptions that could violate service-level agreements or even data availability requirements stipulated by regulations. Implementing a highly restrictive security policy from the outset without a pilot phase or user feedback is also professionally unacceptable. While aiming for maximum security, this approach ignores the practical realities of business operations and can lead to widespread user lockout or application inaccessibility. This can indirectly lead to non-compliance if essential business functions are hindered, and it demonstrates a lack of consideration for the impact on individuals and the organization's ability to function, which is an ethical oversight in system administration. Focusing solely on signature-based detection and neglecting other SEP protection technologies like intrusion prevention or behavioral analysis, without a clear risk assessment justifying this limitation, is another failure. This narrow approach leaves the organization vulnerable to zero-day threats and advanced persistent attacks that signature-based methods cannot detect. Regulatory frameworks often imply a requirement for a comprehensive security posture, and an incomplete implementation, even if technically functional, can be deemed insufficient in the face of a security incident, leading to regulatory penalties. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a structured, risk-informed approach to implementing security solutions. This involves understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, regulatory obligations, and business objectives. A phased deployment, starting with thorough planning, assessment, and pilot testing, is crucial. Continuous monitoring, regular policy review, and adaptation to evolving threats and business needs are essential components of maintaining an effective and compliant security posture. This iterative process ensures that security measures are both robust and practical, minimizing risk to the organization and its stakeholders. Question 4. Analysis of a scenario where a critical business application is intermittently failing to launch after a recent Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policy update that introduced new heuristic detection rules. The application vendor has not provided specific exclusions for SEP, and the IT department is under pressure to restore functionality immediately. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Research the specific heuristic detection rules that were updated and attempt to identify if any specific file types or behaviors are being flagged by the application's launch process. Option B. Instruct the application users to manually disable their local SCP client's real-time protection when they need to launch the application. Option C. Temporarily disable the new heuristic detection rules in the SEP policy for the affected servers until further investigation can be completed. Option D. Immediately create a broad exclusion for the entire application directory within Symantec Endpoint Protection to allow it to launch. The correct answer is C. Temporarily disable the new heuristic detection rules in the SEP policy for the affected servers until further investigation can be completed. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational requirements of business-critical applications. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the potential impact of security policies on system performance and application functionality, and making informed decisions that minimize risk without unduly hindering productivity. The specific context of Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 12.1 administration requires knowledge of its features and how they interact with the operating system and applications. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based methodology. It prioritizes understanding the specific application's behavior, consulting vendor documentation for compatibility, and conducting thorough testing in a controlled environment before implementing changes broadly. This aligns with best practices in IT security and change management, ensuring that security measures are effective and do not introduce unintended disruptions. The regulatory framework for IT administration, while not explicitly detailed in the exam syllabus as a separate legal document, implicitly mandates due diligence, risk management, and adherence to vendor support guidelines. Implementing security changes without proper validation would violate these implicit professional obligations. Incorrect approaches fail to adhere to these principles. Implementing a broad exclusion without understanding the specific risks or the application's needs is a reactive and potentially damaging strategy. It prioritizes a perceived immediate threat over a comprehensive understanding of the environment. This can lead to security gaps if the exclusion is too broad, or operational failures if it doesn't resolve the underlying issue. Relying solely on anecdotal evidence or assumptions about application behavior is unprofessional and increases the likelihood of negative consequences. Furthermore, bypassing established change control processes or vendor recommendations demonstrates a disregard for structured IT governance and risk mitigation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should follow a structured approach. 1. Identify the problem. Clearly define the issue, including any error messages, performance degradation, or application failures. 2. Gather information. Collect logs, system performance data, and application-specific details. Consult vendor documentation for both SCP and the affected application. 3. Assess risk. Evaluate the potential impact of the issue on security and business operations. 4. Develop potential solutions. Brainstorm possible remediation steps, considering both security and operational impacts. 5. Test solutions. In a controlled lab or staging environment, test each potential solution to validate its effectiveness and identify any side effects. 6. Implement the chosen solution. Follow established change management procedures, including communication and rollback plans. 7. Monitor and verify. After implementation, closely monitor the system and application to ensure the issue is resolved and no new problems have arisen. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the newly implemented Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 firewall policy is causing intermittent connectivity issues for critical legacy business applications running on a subset of servers. These applications are essential for daily operations and cannot tolerate extended downtime. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this implementation challenge? Option A. Immediately revert the firewall policy to its previous state on the affected servers to restore application functionality and defer the security policy implementation until a later date. Option B. Exclude the affected legacy servers from the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 firewall policy enforcement altogether to prevent any potential impact on their operations. Option C. Disable the firewall policy entirely on the affected legacy servers to ensure uninterrupted operation of the critical applications. Option D. Deploy the firewall policy in logging-only mode on the affected servers to gather data on blocked traffic. Analyze the logs to identify specific application communication patterns, and then create targeted exceptions or adjust policy rules before enabling blocking. The correct answer is D. Deploy the firewall policy in logging-only mode on the affected servers to gather data on blocked traffic, analyze the logs to identify specific application communication patterns, and then create targeted exceptions or adjust policy rules before enabling blocking. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational requirements of critical business systems. The risk assessment highlights a potential conflict between security policy enforcement and system availability, which is a core concern for any IT administrator. The challenge lies in identifying a solution that mitigates the identified security risk without causing unacceptable disruption to business operations, particularly when dealing with legacy systems that may have limited compatibility with newer security features. This requires a nuanced understanding of both the Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) 12.1 capabilities and the specific operational context of the affected systems. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased and controlled deployment of the SCP 12.1 firewall policy, starting with a monitoring mode. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing risk mitigation through a systematic and evidence-based methodology. By initially deploying the policy in a mode that logs but does not block traffic, administrators can gather crucial data on application behavior and network dependencies without impacting system functionality. This data is essential for identifying potential conflicts and developing appropriate exceptions or tuning the policy before full enforcement. This approach directly addresses the risk assessment findings by allowing for informed decision-making, minimizing the likelihood of unintended consequences, and ensuring compliance with operational continuity requirements. It demonstrates a proactive and responsible approach to security implementation, adhering to principles of least privilege and minimizing disruption. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the firewall policy in blocking mode immediately without prior monitoring or testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards the potential for operational disruption, which can lead to business losses, reputational damage, and potential noncompliance with service-level agreements or industry regulations that mandate system availability. This approach is reactive rather than proactive and demonstrates a lack of due diligence in assessing the impact of security changes. Disabling the firewall policy entirely on the affected legacy systems, while seemingly resolving the immediate operational issue, represents a critical security failure. It directly contradicts the purpose of implementing Symantec endpoint protection and leaves these systems vulnerable to known and emerging threats. This action would be a clear violation of security policies and potentially regulatory requirements related to data protection and system security. It prioritizes convenience over security, which is professionally unacceptable. Excluding the legacy systems from the SEP-12. One deployment altogether without a thorough risk assessment and compensating controls is also a failure. It creates a security gap and an unmanaged risk within the network. While the systems might be critical, they still require protection. This approach abdicates responsibility for securing these assets and could lead to a breach that originates from these unprotected systems, impacting the entire network. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with this situation should employ a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the findings of the risk assessment and the specific nature of the identified conflict. Second, consult the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 documentation to understand the available policy modes and configuration options, particularly for the firewall component. Third, engage with the system administrators and business owners of the legacy systems to understand their operational requirements and dependencies. Fourth, develop a phased implementation plan that includes a monitoring phase to gather data, followed by a controlled rollout with specific exceptions or tuning as needed. This iterative approach, grounded in data and collaboration, ensures that security measures are effective without compromising essential business functions. Question 6. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in CPU and memory utilization on client machines, coinciding with the recent deployment of a new Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policy. The administrator needs to address this performance degradation without compromising the security of the network. Option A. Disable specific Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 security features, such as intrusion prevention or firewall rules, on affected machines until performance improves. Option B. Analyze the new policy's rules and configurations to identify specific components or settings that might be resource-intensive, and then adjust or optimize those specific elements. Option C. Immediately revert to the previous, less restrictive Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policy to restore system performance. Option D. Create broad exclusions within the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policy for all applications exhibiting high resource usage. The correct answer is B. Analyze the new policy's rules and configurations to identify specific components or settings that might be resource-intensive, and then adjust or optimize those specific elements. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for system responsiveness with the long-term implications of security policy enforcement. The administrator must make a judgment call that impacts both operational efficiency and the organization's security posture, all while adhering to Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1's administrative best practices and implied regulatory compliance regarding data protection and system integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and controlled method for addressing performance degradation. By first investigating the root cause of the performance issues, the administrator ensures that any subsequent actions are targeted and effective, rather than reactive and potentially disruptive. This aligns with principles of good IT governance, which emphasize understanding system behavior before implementing changes. Furthermore, a methodical approach minimizes the risk of inadvertently weakening security controls, which could have regulatory implications if sensitive data is compromised. This proactive and analytical stance is crucial for maintaining a secure and efficient environment. An incorrect approach that involves immediately disabling security features without proper analysis is professionally unacceptable due to significant regulatory and ethical failures. Such an action directly compromises the organization's security posture, potentially exposing sensitive data to threats. This could violate data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, or similar data privacy laws that mandate reasonable security measures. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the organization's responsibility to protect its assets and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach, such as blindly applying broad exclusions without understanding their impact, risks creating security blind spots. This can lead to undetected malware or policy violations, again, potentially breaching regulatory requirements for system monitoring and security. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured troubleshooting methodology. This includes 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact, 2. Gathering relevant data, performance metrics, logs, 3. Forming hypotheses about the cause, 4. Testing hypotheses in a controlled manner, 5. Implementing solutions based on evidence, and 6. Verifying the effectiveness of the solution and monitoring for recurrence. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with both operational and security objectives, thereby mitigating regulatory and ethical risks. Question 7. Research into a critical Symantec endpoint protection 12. One server failure has revealed that a specific, unpatched vulnerability is actively being exploited, posing an immediate threat to the entire network. The standard procedure for applying patches requires a multi-day change control process, including testing and approval, which cannot be met given the urgency. As the administrator responsible, you have the technical capability to temporarily disable a security feature within Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one to allow a critical business application to function while a more permanent fix is developed. But this action deviates from established security policies. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Implement the solution without any documentation or notification, assuming the urgency of the business application's operation justifies the deviation from policy. Option B. Immediately disable the security feature to restore application functionality, then meticulously document the incident, the action taken, and the rationale for bypassing standard procedures, and escalate this documentation to the relevant security and management authorities for retrospective approval and review. Option C. Delay reporting the incident and the implemented solution until a formal audit or review is scheduled, hoping the deviation goes unnoticed. Option D. Seek approval from a senior peer administrator to disable the security feature, as they have a good understanding of the system's criticality. The correct answer is B. Immediately disable the security feature to restore application functionality, then meticulously document the incident, the action taken, and the rationale for bypassing standard procedures, and escalate this documentation to the relevant security and management authorities for retrospective approval and review. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between a perceived immediate operational need and the established security protocols designed to protect sensitive data. The administrator is under pressure to restore functionality quickly, but doing so without adhering to the defined change management and security review processes could introduce vulnerabilities or violate data handling policies. The ethical dilemma lies in balancing the urgency of business operations with the responsibility to maintain system integrity and data confidentiality, as mandated by Symantec's best practices and general IT security principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the incident, the proposed solution, and the rationale for bypassing standard procedures, followed by immediate escalation to the appropriate security and management authorities for retrospective approval. This upholds professional accountability and transparency. It acknowledges the deviation from policy while ensuring that the decision is reviewed by those with the authority to assess the risk and impact. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, ensuring that even emergency actions are subject to oversight and learning, thereby preventing future unauthorized deviations and reinforcing the importance of established security controls. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately implement the solution without any documentation or notification, assuming the urgency justifies the bypass. This fails to establish an audit trail, making it impossible to track the deviation or understand the risks taken. It undermines the integrity of the change management process and could be seen as a breach of trust and professional responsibility, potentially violating internal policies and best practices for system administration. Another incorrect approach is to delay reporting the incident and the implemented solution until a formal audit or review, hoping it goes unnoticed. This is ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible. It demonstrates a lack of transparency and a willingness to conceal actions that deviate from established protocols, which can lead to significant security risks if the bypass introduced vulnerabilities. It also erodes confidence in the IT department's adherence to security standards. A third incorrect approach is to seek approval from a peer or a junior colleague rather than the designated security or management authority. This bypasses the established hierarchy and risk assessment framework. It is unprofessional because it outsources the decision-making responsibility to individuals who may not have the full context, authority, or expertise to properly evaluate the security implications and potential consequences of the action. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first prioritizing the immediate containment of any active threat or critical system failure. Simultaneously, they must initiate the documentation process, even if it's a preliminary record of the event and the emergency actions taken. The next critical step is to identify and engage the appropriate stakeholders, security officers, IT management, or compliance teams, to report the incident and the deviation from standard procedures. This engagement should include a clear explanation of the situation, the actions taken, and the justification for the bypass. The professional should then cooperate fully with any subsequent review or investigation, using the experience to contribute to improving incident response protocols and security policies. This methodical approach ensures accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement in security posture. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that a new critical content update for Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 is available, designed to address recently identified widespread malware threats. However, the IT department has experienced past issues with SCP content updates causing intermittent network connectivity problems on critical business servers. What is the most prudent course of action to ensure both enhanced security and minimal business disruption? Option A. Implement a phased rollout of the content update, starting with a pilot group of non-critical workstations and servers, monitoring for any adverse effects before proceeding with a wider deployment. Option B. Immediately deploy the content update to all endpoints across the organization to ensure maximum protection against the new malware threats as quickly as possible. Option C. Deploy the content update to a small, random selection of endpoints without a structured testing plan to gauge immediate feedback. Option D. Postpone the content update indefinitely until a more stable version is released by Symantec, prioritizing current operational stability. The correct answer is A. Implement a phased rollout of the content update, starting with a pilot group of non-critical workstations and servers, monitoring for any adverse effects before proceeding with a wider deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the administration of Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 12.1, specifically concerning the deployment of critical security updates. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for enhanced protection against emerging threats with the potential disruption to business operations caused by a widespread, unvetted update. The organization must make a decision that prioritizes security without compromising essential services, a common dilemma in IT security management. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of the SCP-12.1 content update, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical systems. This represents best professional practice because it allows for the validation of the update's compatibility and efficacy in a controlled environment before a full deployment. This proactive testing minimizes the risk of unforeseen issues, such as system instability or performance degradation, which could impact business continuity. This aligns with the general principles of IT governance and risk management, which emphasize a structured and risk-averse approach to system changes, particularly those impacting security. While no specific regulatory framework for SCP-12.1 administration is provided for this exam, the underlying principle of due diligence and risk mitigation is universally applicable in professional IT environments. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deploy the content update to all endpoints without prior testing. This fails to adhere to the principle of risk assessment and mitigation. The potential for widespread disruption, data loss, or service unavailability due to an untested update constitutes a significant operational risk. Ethically, it could be argued that failing to adequately test a security update before widespread deployment demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting the organization's assets and data. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the update indefinitely due to fear of disruption, thereby leaving the organization vulnerable to known threats. This decision prioritizes operational convenience over essential security. In a professional context, this demonstrates a failure to understand and manage the organization's threat landscape and a dereliction of duty in maintaining an adequate security posture. A third incorrect approach would be to deploy the update only to a small, arbitrary subset of systems without a clear pilot plan or success criteria. This lacks the systematic approach required for effective risk management. It does not provide sufficient data to confidently proceed with a full deployment, and still carries a significant risk of encountering issues on a larger scale. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Risk identification. Clearly define the potential risks associated with both deploying and not deploying the update. 2. Impact assessment. Evaluate the potential business impact of each risk. 3. Solution evaluation. Consider various deployment strategies, such as phased rollouts, pilot testing, and rollback plans. 4. Decision and justification. Select the strategy that best balances security needs with operational continuity, documenting the rationale. 5. Monitoring and review. Continuously monitor the deployment and be prepared to adjust the plan based on real-time feedback. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that Symantec Endpoint Protection is generating frequent alerts for a critical business application, indicating potential malware activity. The IT operations team reports that the application is functioning normally and suspects these alerts are false positives impacting application performance. As the administrator responsible for Symantec Endpoint Protection, what is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation? Option A. Ignore the alerts and instruct the IT operations team to monitor the application's performance, assuming the alerts are benign. Option B. Immediately disable the specific detection rule that is generating the alerts to prevent further disruption to the critical business application. Option C. Implement a broad exception within Symantec Endpoint Protection to allow all processes associated with the critical business application to run without inspection. Option D. Investigate the specific alerts thoroughly, gather detailed logs of the flagged activity, and consult with the application owners to validate the application's behavior before considering targeted policy adjustments. The correct answer is D. Investigate the specific alerts thoroughly, gather detailed logs of the flagged activity, and consult with the application owners to validate the application's behavior before considering targeted policy adjustments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection against potential threats with the operational requirements of business applications. Core difficulty lies in accurately identifying legitimate application behavior that might be flagged as suspicious by security policies, and conversely, ensuring that genuine threats are not inadvertently allowed due to overly permissive configurations. This requires a deep understanding of both Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP policies, and the specific operational context of the business. Misjudgments can lead to significant disruptions, data breaches, or compliance violations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based method for policy tuning. This begins with thorough investigation and validation of the flagged events, understanding the specific application, its normal operational patterns, and the context of the alert is paramount. Leveraging SEP's detailed logging and reporting capabilities to gather comprehensive data on the suspicious activity is crucial. This data then informs a targeted adjustment to the SEP policy, such as creating an exception for the specific application or process, but only after confirming its legitimacy. This approach aligns with best practices for security administration, ensuring that security measures are effective without unduly hindering business operations, and it supports the principle of least privilege by only granting necessary exceptions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Disabling the specific detection rule entirely without understanding the nature of the flagged activity is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach creates a broad vulnerability, potentially allowing actual malware to bypass protection. It directly contravenes the objective of maintaining a secure environment and could lead to a breach, violating data protection regulations and the organization's duty of care. Implementing a blanket exception for all applications on the affected server, or for all users accessing the application, is another critical failure. This approach is overly permissive and undermines the integrity of the security policy. It significantly increases the attack surface, making the environment susceptible to a wide range of threats that would otherwise be detected. This broad relaxation of security controls is irresponsible and could lead to severe compliance issues and reputational damage. Ignoring the alert and hoping it resolves itself is a passive and negligent approach. It represents a failure to actively manage the security posture of the environment. This inaction can allow a minor issue to escalate into a major security incident, leading to data loss, system downtime, and potential legal ramifications. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the organization's security responsibilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations with a structured methodology. First, always prioritize understanding the alert and its context. Gather all available data from the security solution and relevant system logs. Second, assess the risk associated with the flagged activity. Is it a known threat, a false positive, or potentially malicious behavior? Third, consult with application owners or relevant stakeholders to understand the legitimate function of the application or process. Fourth, implement the most granular and least permissive solution possible, such as a specific exception for a known good file or process, rather than a broad rule. Finally, continuously monitor the environment to ensure that implemented changes have the desired effect and do not introduce new vulnerabilities. Question 10. Which approach would be most effective in resolving an issue where a critical business application is experiencing intermittent performance degradation, suspected to be caused by Symantec endpoint protection policies, while ensuring minimal disruption to both security and business operations? Option A. Systematically analyze Symantec endpoint protection logs and application traffic to identify the specific policy or rule causing the conflict. Then implement a targeted exception or adjustment, followed by controlled testing. Option B. Immediately disable the specific Symantec endpoint protection component identified as potentially causing the conflict to restore application performance. Option C. Implement a broad exclusion for the entire application directory within Symantec endpoint protection scan settings to eliminate potential interference. Option D. Escalate the issue directly to the application vendor for a resolution, providing them with details of the suspected Symantec endpoint protection interference. The correct answer is B. Immediately disable the specific Symantec endpoint protection component identified as potentially causing the conflict to restore application performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational requirements of critical business applications. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating security risks without causing unacceptable disruption to services that are vital for the organization's functioning. This requires a nuanced understanding of Symantec endpoint protection, SEP, policies, application dependencies, and the organization's risk tolerance. Careful judgment is needed to avoid overblocking legitimate traffic or underprotecting against genuine threats. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and risk-aware methodology. By first identifying the specific SEP component causing the issue, and then analyzing the application's traffic patterns and dependencies, administrators can make informed decisions. Implementing a targeted exception or policy adjustment based on this analysis, followed by rigorous testing in a controlled environment, minimizes the risk of unintended consequences. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and ensures that security measures are effective without being overly restrictive, thereby maintaining operational continuity while upholding security posture. An incorrect approach that involves immediately disabling the SEP component without proper investigation is professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses the security controls without understanding the underlying cause or the potential exposure created. It represents a failure to adhere to established security protocols and a disregard for the potential vulnerabilities introduced. Such a hasty action could leave the system exposed to malware or other threats that the disabled component was designed to prevent, leading to a security incident. Another incorrect approach, such as broadly excluding the entire application directory from all SEP scans, is also professionally unsound. While it might resolve the immediate performance issue, it creates a significant security gap. This broad exclusion removes critical protection mechanisms from a potentially vulnerable area of the system, making it an easy target for malware. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the specific conflict and opting for a blanket solution that compromises security. A third incorrect approach, which is to escalate the issue to the application vendor without attempting any local troubleshooting or analysis, is also problematic. While vendor support is valuable, it should not be the first resort for a security product conflict. This approach abdicates responsibility for initial problem solving and can lead to delays in resolution. It fails to leverage the administrator's expertise in Symantec endpoint protection and the local environment, potentially missing a straightforward configuration fix. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured troubleshooting methodology. This includes clearly defining the problem, gathering relevant information, logs, error messages, application behavior, isolating the cause, identifying the specific SCP feature or policy, developing hypotheses, testing solutions systematically, documenting all actions and outcomes, and communicating effectively with stakeholders. This iterative process ensures that security is maintained while operational impact is minimized. Question 11. The review process indicates that a new, high-severity vulnerability has been disclosed in a core business application used across the organization, with initial threat intelligence suggesting active exploitation in the wild. Given the application's critical role in daily operations, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for the Symantec Endpoint Protection Administrator? Option A. Immediately deploy a Symantec Endpoint Protection policy to block all execution of the affected application across the entire network until a permanent fix is available. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment to determine the specific impact on the organization, evaluate available mitigation options within Symantec Endpoint Protection, and develop a phased remediation plan. Option C. Temporarily disable Symantec Endpoint Protection's intrusion prevention system, IPS, signatures related to this vulnerability to avoid potential false positives impacting the application's functionality. Option D. Escalate the issue to senior management and await their directive on how to proceed without taking any immediate technical action. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy a Symantec Endpoint Protection policy to block all execution of the affected application across the entire network until a permanent fix is available. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection against the potential for operational disruption. A new threat intelligence report highlights a zero-day vulnerability affecting a widely used application within the organization. The challenge lies in rapidly assessing the risk posed by this vulnerability and determining the most effective and least disruptive remediation strategy. The organization's reliance on this application for critical business functions means that any security measure, such as immediate blocking or disabling, must be carefully considered to avoid significant operational impact. This requires a nuanced approach that goes beyond simply reacting to a threat. Correct approach analysis. The most professional and compliant approach involves a multifaceted risk assessment. This begins with understanding the specific threat intelligence. What is the exploitability of the vulnerability? What is the potential impact if exploited? And are there any active exploits in the wild targeting this specific vulnerability? Concurrently, an assessment of the organization's exposure is crucial. How many systems are running the affected application? What are the critical business processes that depend on it? And what are the existing compensating controls? Based on this comprehensive understanding, a tiered remediation strategy can be developed. This might include immediate deployment of a virtual patch if available and effective, followed by a planned rollout of a permanent fix or application update, with clear communication to stakeholders about the timeline and potential impact. This approach aligns with best practices in incident response and risk management, ensuring that security measures are proportionate to the threat and minimize business disruption, thereby upholding the organization's operational continuity and data integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing an immediate, organization-wide block of the application without a thorough risk assessment is a failure to adhere to responsible risk management principles. This approach prioritizes a reactive, absolute security stance over operational continuity, potentially causing significant business disruption and impacting employee productivity without a clear understanding of the actual, immediate risk to the organization. It fails to consider the potential for false positives or the availability of less disruptive mitigation strategies. Disregarding the threat intelligence entirely due to the application's critical nature is also a significant professional and ethical failure. This approach ignores the organization's responsibility to protect its assets and data from known and emerging threats. It creates a blind spot in the security posture, leaving the organization vulnerable to exploitation and potential data breaches, which could have severe regulatory and financial consequences. Focusing solely on deploying a permanent fix without considering interim mitigation measures, such as virtual patching or enhanced monitoring, represents an incomplete risk assessment. While a permanent fix is the ultimate goal, delaying its deployment without any immediate protective measures leaves the organization exposed during the remediation window. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in protecting against active threats and could be seen as negligent if an exploit occurs during this period. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk assessment framework. This involves 1. Threat identification and understanding, thoroughly analyzing the nature and severity of the threat. 2. Vulnerability and exposure assessment, determining the organization's specific susceptibility and the potential impact. 3. Control evaluation, assessing existing security measures and their effectiveness. 4. Risk prioritization, ranking risks based on likelihood and impact. 5. Mitigation strategy development, creating a plan that balances security needs with operational requirements, considering a range of options from immediate containment to long-term solutions. 6. Communication and documentation, ensuring all stakeholders are informed and all actions are properly recorded. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both security best practices and business objectives. Question 12. The analysis reveals that a critical business application, essential for daily financial reporting, is intermittently triggering a potentially unwanted program (PUP) detection within Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1. The application's vendor has confirmed that the detected behavior is a legitimate part of its functionality, designed to access and modify specific system registry keys for performance optimization. The security team is concerned about the potential for this behavior to be exploited by malware, while the business operations team is reporting significant delays in financial reporting due to the application being quarantined or its processes terminated by SCP. What is the most appropriate and professionally responsible course of action to address this implementation challenge? Option A. Immediately block the execution of the financial reporting application's executable file to prevent any potential security risk and inform the business operations team of the security measure. Option B. Create a specific exception within Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1. To whitelist the identified process and its associated registry key modifications, ensuring the exception is narrowly defined to only cover the legitimate application behavior. Option C. Disable the potentially unwanted program detection policy in Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1. Across the entire network to prevent further disruptions to the financial reporting application. Option D. Ignore the PUP alerts for the financial reporting application, assuming the vendor's confirmation is sufficient, and focus security efforts on other systems. The correct answer is B. Create a specific exception within Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1. To whitelist the identified process and its associated registry key modifications, ensuring the exception is narrowly defined to only cover the legitimate application behavior. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common implementation challenge in Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 12. 1. Environments. Balancing robust security posture with the operational needs of a critical business application. The scenario presents a conflict between a security policy designed to prevent unauthorized process execution and the legitimate, albeit unusual, behavior of a core business application. This requires a nuanced understanding of SCP's capabilities and a careful assessment of risk versus operational impact. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying the root cause of the security alert without overcompromising security or disrupting essential business functions. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation and a targeted remediation strategy. This means understanding the specific security risk posed by the detected behavior, verifying its legitimacy within the business context, and then implementing a precise exception within SCP's policies. This approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the principle of least privilege and targeted security. By creating a specific exception for the known, legitimate process, the administrator ensures that the broader security policy remains intact, protecting against other potential threats, while allowing the critical application to function. This demonstrates a proactive and informed security posture, minimizing both security gaps and operational disruption. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the underlying issue or introduce unacceptable risks. One incorrect approach would be to broadly disable the security feature that triggered the alert. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a significant security vulnerability. The disabled feature was in place to protect against a class of threats, and its wholesale deactivation leaves the entire environment exposed to those threats, violating the fundamental duty to maintain a secure system. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the alert and hope it does not recur. This is a failure of due diligence and risk management. Ignoring security alerts is a direct contravention of responsible IT administration and can lead to significant security breaches, reputational damage, and potential regulatory noncompliance if data is compromised. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately block the process without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and can lead to unnecessary business disruption. While security is paramount, understanding the context and legitimacy of a process before blocking it is crucial for maintaining operational continuity and avoiding the appearance of arbitrary or punitive security measures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response framework. First, thoroughly investigate the alert to understand the nature of the detected activity and the specific security rule that was triggered. Second, gather context from the affected system or application owner to determine the legitimacy of the activity. Third, assess the risk associated with allowing the activity versus the risk of disrupting business operations. Fourth, implement the most targeted and least permissive solution, which often involves creating specific exceptions or whitelisting known good processes, rather than disabling broader security controls. Finally, document the investigation, decision, and remediation steps for audit and future reference. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that a critical business application is experiencing intermittent performance issues, and Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) logs indicate frequent alerts related to a specific heuristic detection signature targeting potentially unwanted applications, PUA. The application vendor states that the PUA detection is a false positive and is impacting the application's functionality. As the SCP administrator, what is the most appropriate course of action to resolve this issue while maintaining a strong security posture? Option A. Rely on the application vendor's assertion and create a broad exclusion rule for the entire application directory without verifying the specific files or behaviors causing the PUA detection. Option B. Ignore the SCP alerts and the application performance issues, assuming they will resolve themselves over time, and focus on other security tasks. Option C. Immediately disable the specific heuristic detection signature globally across all endpoints to restore application functionality and prevent further alerts. Option D. Investigate the PUA signature by consulting Symantec documentation, analyzing the specific files or behaviors triggering the alert, and then implementing a targeted exclusion for the application's executable file after thorough testing in a controlled environment. The correct answer is C. Immediately disable the specific heuristic detection signature globally across all endpoints to restore application functionality and prevent further alerts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security administration, balancing the need for robust protection against potential threats with the operational requirements of business applications. The core difficulty lies in identifying and mitigating risks without causing unacceptable disruption to critical business functions. The administrator must make a judgment call that impacts both security posture and business continuity, requiring a deep understanding of Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) capabilities, application dependencies, and the organization's risk tolerance. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly, coupled with the potential for significant business impact, makes this a professionally challenging situation demanding careful consideration. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of investigation, analysis, and controlled remediation. This begins with gathering detailed information about the false positive, including the specific SEP signature, the affected application, and the nature of the alert. The next critical step is to consult the Symantec documentation and knowledge base to understand the signature's purpose and potential impact. Following this, a controlled test environment or a phased rollout of any proposed exclusion or exception is essential to validate its effectiveness and ensure it does not introduce new vulnerabilities or negatively impact other systems. Documenting all actions, justifications, and outcomes is paramount for audit trails, future reference, and demonstrating due diligence. This methodical approach aligns with best practices for security administration, emphasizing risk management, operational stability, and accountability. It ensures that security decisions are informed, tested, and justifiable, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling the signature globally without thorough investigation or testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It immediately weakens the organization's security posture by leaving all endpoints vulnerable to the threat that the signature is designed to detect. This action demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to established security protocols, potentially violating internal policies and industry best practices for risk management. Implementing an exclusion or exception based solely on user reports without independent verification or testing is also professionally unacceptable. This approach bypasses critical validation steps, increasing the risk of inadvertently allowing malicious activity to go undetected or creating a security loophole. It fails to demonstrate a structured approach to security management and could lead to a compromised system, which would be a direct violation of security responsibilities. Ignoring the alert and hoping it resolves itself is a passive and negligent approach. It represents a failure to actively manage security risks and a disregard for potential threats. This inaction can lead to a security breach, data loss, or system compromise, all of which carry significant regulatory and financial consequences. It demonstrates a lack of proactive security management and a failure to fulfill the administrator's core responsibilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk assessment and mitigation. This involves 1. Information gathering. Collect all relevant data about the alert and affected systems. 2. Risk analysis. Evaluate the potential impact of the threat versus the impact of the false positive on business operations. 3. Solution exploration. Research and identify potential solutions, including exclusions, exceptions, or signature updates, considering their security implications. 4. Controlled testing. Validate any proposed solution in a controlled environment before widespread deployment. 5. Documentation. Maintain a comprehensive record of all actions, decisions, and their justifications. 6. Communication. Inform relevant stakeholders about the issue, the chosen solution, and its implications. This systematic approach ensures that security decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational objectives and regulatory requirements. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that a newly implemented Symantec endpoint protection policy is causing significant disruption to the daily workflows of the marketing department, impacting their ability to access critical cloud-based creative tools. The marketing team has formally requested adjustments to the policy to accommodate their specific application dependencies. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Symantec Endpoint Protection Administrator? Option A. Immediately revert the Symantec Endpoint Protection policy to its previous configuration to alleviate the reported disruptions and address the marketing department's concerns. Option B. Inform the marketing department that security policies are absolute and cannot be modified to accommodate individual departmental needs, and instruct them to find alternative methods to perform their tasks. Option C. Engage with the marketing department to understand the specific applications and functionalities being blocked, and collaboratively develop and implement targeted exceptions, policy tuning within Symantec Endpoint Protection to address their needs while maintaining overall security integrity. Option D. Proceed with the current Symantec Endpoint Protection policy implementation across all departments without further investigation, assuming the marketing department's issues are isolated and will resolve over time. The correct answer is C. Engage with the marketing department to understand the specific applications and functionalities being blocked, and collaboratively develop and implement targeted exceptions or policy tuning within Symantec Endpoint Protection to address their needs while maintaining overall security integrity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust security controls with the operational requirements of business units. The challenge lies in understanding the diverse needs and risk appetites of different stakeholders, particularly when a security solution like Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP, impacts their daily workflows. The pressure to maintain high security posture while minimizing disruption requires careful negotiation, clear communication, and a thorough understanding of both technical capabilities and business impact. The absolute priority of jurisdiction requirements for this exam means that any proposed solution must strictly adhere to the principles and guidelines relevant to the administration of Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one within its intended operational context, without referencing external or irrelevant regulatory frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, collaborative process that prioritizes understanding and addressing the specific concerns of the affected business units. This begins with a thorough assessment of the impact of the SEP policy on their operations, followed by a joint effort to identify and implement necessary exceptions or tuning. This aligns with best practices in IT governance and change management, ensuring that security measures are effective without unduly hindering productivity. The focus on collaboration and tailored solutions demonstrates a mature approach to security administration, where technical controls are integrated thoughtfully into the business environment. This approach implicitly respects the operational realities of the stakeholders while upholding the integrity of the security framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket policy without considering the operational impact on specific business units is a failure to adequately assess risk and implement proportionate controls. This can lead to significant operational disruptions, decreased productivity, and potential workarounds that bypass security altogether, thereby undermining the very purpose of the security policy. It demonstrates a lack of stakeholder engagement and a disregard for the practical implications of security decisions. Ignoring the concerns raised by business units and proceeding with the policy implementation without further investigation or modification represents a failure in communication and stakeholder management. This can breed resentment, erode trust, and lead to a perception that security is an impediment rather than an enabler. Ethically, it fails to consider the impact of decisions on those who are directly affected. Proposing to roll back the security policy entirely in response to the first sign of operational difficulty is an overreaction that compromises the security posture of the organization. It suggests an inability to manage change effectively or to find appropriate compromises between security and operational needs. This approach prioritizes immediate convenience over long-term security and risk mitigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with administering Symantec Endpoint Protection must adopt a decision-making process that is both technically sound and operationally aware. This involves 1. Understanding the core security objectives of the policy being implemented. 2. Proactively identifying potential impacts on various business units through consultation and pilot testing. 3. Establishing clear channels for feedback and issue reporting. 4. Analyzing reported issues to determine their root cause and severity. 5. Collaborating with affected stakeholders to develop and implement appropriate solutions, which may include policy tuning, exception management, or user training. 6. Documenting all changes and their justifications, ensuring compliance with internal policies and any relevant external guidelines. 7. Continuously monitoring the effectiveness of the security controls and their impact on operations. This systematic approach ensures that security is implemented effectively while minimizing disruption and fostering a collaborative environment. Question 15. During the evaluation of a new security policy deployment for Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one across a large, heterogeneous corporate network, what is the most prudent approach to ensure successful implementation with minimal disruption? Option A. Initiate a phased rollout, beginning with a pilot group of diverse endpoints to identify and resolve potential conflicts before a full-scale deployment. Option B. Apply the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one policies only to critical servers first, and then proceed with deployment to all other endpoints without further testing. Option C. Implement the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one policies on a small group of non-critical endpoints, and then immediately proceed with a full deployment to all other endpoints without analyzing the pilot results. Option D. Deploy the new Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 policies directly to all endpoints simultaneously to ensure immediate and uniform security coverage. The correct answer is A. Initiate a phased rollout, beginning with a pilot group of diverse endpoints to identify and resolve potential conflicts before a full-scale deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in enterprise environments where security policies must be deployed across a diverse range of endpoints, some of which may have unique hardware or software configurations. Professional challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security with the operational realities of maintaining system stability and user productivity. A hasty or ill-considered deployment can lead to widespread system failures, significant downtime, and a loss of trust in the IT security team. The pressure to implement security measures quickly, coupled with the potential for unforeseen compatibility issues, requires a methodical and risk-aware approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy that begins with a pilot group. This aligns with best professional practices for system administration and security deployment. By testing the Symantec Endpoint Protection (SEP) 12.1 policies on a small, representative subset of endpoints, administrators can identify and resolve any compatibility issues, performance degradations, or functional conflicts before a full-scale deployment. This iterative process allows for refinement of the deployment plan, configuration settings, and rollback procedures. This approach minimizes the risk of widespread disruption and ensures that the security policies are effective and stable across the entire environment. While specific regulations for Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 administration are not provided, general IT best practices and risk management principles, which are implicitly expected in professional IT administration, support this cautious and validated deployment methodology. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the SEP 12.1 policies directly to all endpoints without prior testing is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards the fundamental principle of risk mitigation in IT deployments. It creates a high probability of widespread system instability, application failures, and network performance issues, leading to significant business disruption and potential data integrity risks. Such a failure could result in reputational damage to the IT department and a loss of confidence from end users and management. Implementing the SEP 12.1 policies only on critical servers and then proceeding to all other endpoints without intermediate testing is also professionally unsound. While prioritizing critical systems is important, this approach still bypasses the crucial step of testing on a diverse range of non-critical endpoints that may have different configurations and usage patterns. This can lead to unexpected issues arising in less critical but still important user workstations, causing productivity loss and requiring reactive troubleshooting. Applying the SEP 12.1 policies to a small group of non-critical endpoints and then immediately to all other endpoints without evaluating the pilot results is a flawed strategy. The value of a pilot is in the analysis and subsequent adjustment of the deployment plan based on the findings. Skipping this evaluation phase negates the benefits of the pilot, leaving the organization vulnerable to the same risks as a direct full deployment. It demonstrates a lack of thoroughness and a failure to learn from the initial testing phase. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with implementing new security software like Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 should adopt a structured and risk-based approach. This involves understanding the potential impact of the deployment, identifying critical systems and user groups, and planning for contingencies. A phased rollout starting with a pilot group is a cornerstone of responsible IT deployment. This allows for early detection of issues, validation of configurations, and refinement of the deployment strategy. Documentation of the pilot results, communication with stakeholders, and the establishment of clear rollback procedures are also vital components of professional decision-making in such scenarios. The goal is to achieve the desired security posture without compromising operational stability or user experience. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates that users are experiencing intermittent system slowdowns, and some have directly attributed these issues to Symantec Endpoint Protection. As the administrator, what is the most appropriate initial step to address this feedback while maintaining robust security? Option A. Increase the frequency of full system scans to ensure all systems are thoroughly checked for threats, assuming this might be a cause of perceived slowness. Option B. Review Symantec Endpoint Protection's detailed scan logs and performance monitoring data to identify specific processes or scan schedules that are consuming excessive resources during periods of reported slowdown. Option C. Roll back the Symantec Endpoint Protection client to a previous, known stable version without analyzing current configurations. Option D. Immediately disable real-time scanning for all endpoints to alleviate user-reported performance issues, and then investigate further. The correct answer is B. Review Symantec Endpoint Protection's detailed scan logs and performance monitoring data to identify specific processes or scan schedules that are consuming excessive resources during periods of reported slowdown. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT administration, balancing operational efficiency with security posture, especially when user feedback highlights performance impacts. The professional challenge lies in diagnosing the root cause of perceived slowness without compromising the effectiveness of Symantec Endpoint Protection. SEP. In protecting the organization's assets, a hasty or incomplete diagnostic process could lead to either a weakened security stance or continued user dissatisfaction, both of which have significant business implications. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that prioritizes understanding the specific SEP components or configurations causing the performance degradation. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that any adjustments are informed and targeted, minimizing unintended consequences. Specifically, leveraging SEP's built-in reporting and logging capabilities to identify resource-intensive processes or scan configurations is crucial. This methodical approach ensures that the remediation directly addresses the identified issue, maintaining the integrity of the security policies while improving user experience. This is professionally sound as it avoids broad, potentially destabilizing changes and focuses on evidence-based solutions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disable or significantly reduce the scope of critical SEP security features, such as real-time scanning or intrusion prevention. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it directly compromises the organization's security posture, potentially exposing it to malware, exploits, and data breaches. Such actions would violate the implicit trust placed in the administrator to maintain a secure environment and could lead to non-compliance with internal security policies and potentially external regulatory requirements, depending on the industry and jurisdiction. Though for this exam, we focus on general best practices of security administration. Another incorrect approach would be to make system-wide configuration changes without first isolating the problem to SEP, potentially causing broader system instability or performance issues unrelated to the endpoint protection. This demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and a failure to adhere to a structured troubleshooting methodology. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clear problem definition, followed by hypothesis generation, data collection, using tools like SEP logs, performance monitors, hypothesis testing, and iterative refinement of solutions. This structured approach ensures that decisions are not reactive, but are based on a thorough understanding of the system and the problem at hand, always prioritizing security and compliance. Question 17. The control framework reveals a new Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. One policy designed to enhance threat detection by enabling more aggressive heuristic analysis and blocking potentially unwanted applications, PUA. The administrator is tasked with deploying this policy across the organization. What is the most professional and effective approach to implement this change? Option A. Deploy the new policy only to departments that have explicitly requested enhanced security measures. Option B. Deploy the new policy immediately to all endpoints to ensure maximum protection against current threats. Option C. Postpone the deployment of the new policy until all user feedback and potential complaints have been addressed. Option D. Implement the new policy in a phased approach, starting with a pilot group of IT personnel and gradually rolling it out to other departments after successful validation. The correct answer is B. Deploy the new policy immediately to all endpoints to ensure maximum protection against current threats. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise security administration, balancing the need for robust protection with the operational realities of user productivity and system stability. The administrator must interpret and apply Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP, policies in a way that aligns with the organization's risk tolerance and compliance obligations, without causing undue disruption. The challenge lies in understanding the potential impact of policy changes on diverse user groups and critical business functions, requiring a proactive and analytical approach rather than a reactive one. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based deployment of the new SEP policy. This aligns with best practices for change management and security policy implementation by first testing the policy in a controlled environment, e.g., a pilot group of IT staff or a non-critical department. The administrator can identify and address any unforeseen conflicts or performance issues before a full rollout. This minimizes the risk of widespread disruption to business operations and ensures that the policy effectively enhances security without negatively impacting productivity. This methodical approach is implicitly supported by general IT governance principles that emphasize risk mitigation and controlled change, which are foundational to maintaining a secure and functional IT environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new policy immediately across all endpoints without prior testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for operational continuity and user impact, potentially leading to widespread system outages or performance degradation. This could violate internal service level agreements, SLAs, and in regulated industries could even lead to non-compliance with operational resilience requirements. Deploying the policy only to departments that have explicitly requested it while ignoring others creates an inconsistent security posture. This selective application leaves significant portions of the organization vulnerable and creates security gaps. It fails to uphold the organization's duty to protect all its assets and data, potentially leading to breaches that could have severe regulatory consequences. Ignoring the policy update entirely due to potential user complaints is a failure to uphold the administrator's core responsibility of maintaining endpoint security. This inaction directly undermines the organization's security strategy and exposes it to known threats. It represents a dereliction of duty and a failure to adhere to the principles of proactive risk management, which are essential for compliance and security. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment and impact analysis. This involves understanding the intended benefits of the policy change, identifying potential risks and conflicts, and developing a deployment strategy that mitigates these risks. A phased rollout, pilot testing, and clear communication with stakeholders are crucial components of this process. The decision should always be guided by the organization's security objectives, operational requirements, and any relevant compliance mandates. Question 18. Regulatory review indicates that maintaining comprehensive audit trails for security-related events is a critical compliance requirement. As an administrator of Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1, you are tasked with configuring the audit logging feature. Given the potential for performance impact and storage limitations, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure regulatory adherence while managing system resources effectively? Option A. Configure audit logging to retain logs for a period that meets or exceeds all applicable regulatory mandates, and implement a robust log management strategy including regular archiving or transfer to a centralized logging system. Option B. Allow audit logs to accumulate indefinitely without any specific management plan, relying on the system's default settings to handle storage. Option C. Set the audit log retention period to a minimal duration, such as 24 hours, to conserve storage space, assuming that most critical events will be addressed within that time frame. Option D. Disable audit logging entirely to maximize system performance and minimize storage consumption, as the primary focus is on real-time threat detection. The correct answer is A. Configure audit logging to retain logs for a period that meets or exceeds all applicable regulatory mandates, and implement a robust log management strategy including regular archiving or transfer to a centralized logging system. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing the need for robust security with the operational requirements of business users. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying regulatory requirements for data protection and system integrity within the context of Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP 12.1 administration. Specifically, the requirement to maintain audit logs for security events, a core tenet of many regulatory frameworks, must be reconciled with the potential for excessive log generation to impact system performance or storage. The administrator must make a judgment call that upholds compliance without causing undue disruption. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves configuring SEP to retain audit logs for a period that meets or exceeds regulatory mandates, while also implementing a strategy for log management, such as regular archiving or transfer to a centralized logging system. This best practice ensures that all security-relevant events are captured and available for audit purposes, fulfilling compliance obligations. It demonstrates a proactive understanding of both security requirements and operational constraints, aligning with the principles of responsible data stewardship and system governance often found in regulatory frameworks. This approach prioritizes the integrity of audit trails, which are critical for incident response, forensic analysis, and demonstrating compliance to auditors. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling audit logging entirely for performance reasons is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the principle of accountability and transparency in security operations. Without audit logs, it becomes impossible to track who did what, when, and to which system, making it impossible to investigate security incidents, identify breaches, or prove compliance with data protection regulations. This approach creates a blind spot in the security posture and leaves the organization vulnerable to severe penalties for noncompliance. Setting audit log retention to a very short, arbitrary period without considering regulatory requirements is also a failure. While it might reduce storage overhead, it compromises the ability to conduct thorough investigations or meet audit demands. Many regulations specify minimum retention periods for security logs, and failing to adhere to these can lead to fines and reputational damage. This approach prioritizes short-term convenience over long-term security and compliance, ignoring the need for log management altogether and allowing logs to accumulate indefinitely without a strategy for archiving or deletion can lead to performance degradation and storage exhaustion. While not a direct regulatory violation in itself, it creates an environment where log data becomes unmanageable, potentially hindering the ability to retrieve necessary information for audits or investigations, and indirectly impacting compliance efforts. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and proactive system management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first identifying the specific regulatory requirements applicable to their organization regarding security log retention. This involves consulting relevant legal and compliance teams. Once the minimum retention period is established, they should then assess the capabilities of Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1 and the organization's infrastructure to determine the most effective and efficient method for managing these logs. This includes evaluating options for log forwarding, archiving, and storage. The decision-making process should prioritize compliance, followed by operational efficiency and system stability. Regular review and testing of the log management strategy are also crucial to ensure its continued effectiveness. Question 19. The audit findings indicate a significant delay in the planned deployment of Symantec Endpoint Protection clients across the organization due to ongoing, unresolved network infrastructure instability. Given this situation, which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action to ensure endpoint security while minimizing operational risk? Option A. Initiate a phased deployment, starting with a small pilot group of users and locations, to identify and address any compatibility or performance issues before a broader rollout. Option B. Attempt a rapid, unverified deployment across all endpoints as a temporary measure, with the intention of addressing any issues that arise post-deployment. Option C. Proceed with a full, organization-wide deployment immediately, assuming the network instability will not affect the majority of endpoints. Option D. Postpone the Symantec Endpoint Protection deployment indefinitely until all network infrastructure issues are completely resolved, without implementing any interim security measures. The correct answer is A. Initiate a phased deployment, starting with a small pilot group of users and locations, to identify and address any compatibility or performance issues before a broader rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical security component, Symantec Endpoint Protection, SEP client deployment, has been delayed due to unforeseen network infrastructure issues. A professional challenge, lies in balancing the urgency of securing endpoints against the risk of disrupting ongoing business operations. A hasty deployment without proper planning or testing could lead to widespread network instability or further security vulnerabilities, while an indefinite delay leaves the organization exposed. The need for a structured, risk-based approach is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, controlled deployment strategy. This aligns with best practices for managing significant IT infrastructure changes. By first deploying to a pilot group, administrators can identify and resolve any compatibility or performance issues in a contained environment before a wider rollout. This minimizes the risk of large-scale disruption and ensures that the deployment process is refined. This approach is professionally sound as it demonstrates due diligence, risk mitigation, and a commitment to maintaining operational continuity while achieving security objectives. It implicitly adheres to principles of responsible system administration and change management, which are foundational to maintaining a secure and stable IT environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with a full, unmitigated deployment across the entire organization, despite the identified network issues. This is professionally unacceptable because it disregards the potential for widespread system failure or performance degradation, directly impacting business operations. It represents a failure in risk assessment and management, potentially leading to significant financial and reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of care for the organization's operational integrity. Another incorrect approach is to indefinitely postpone the SEP deployment until the network issues are completely resolved, without any interim security measures. This leaves the organization vulnerable to endpoint threats for an extended period, which is a direct contravention of the fundamental purpose of endpoint protection. It signifies a failure to prioritize security and a lack of proactive problem solving, potentially exposing sensitive data and systems to compromise. This approach fails to meet the organization's security obligations. A third incorrect approach is to attempt a quick-fix deployment by bypassing standard testing and validation procedures, hoping the network issues will not impact the majority of endpoints. This is professionally reckless. It prioritizes speed over reliability and security, increasing the likelihood of unforeseen problems that could be more difficult and costly to resolve later. This approach demonstrates a disregard for established IT governance and change management protocols, which are designed to prevent such failures. Professional reasoning. When faced with implementation challenges like this, professionals should follow a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the scope and impact of the identified issues' network problems. 2. Assessing the risks associated with both proceeding with the deployment and delaying it. 3. Evaluating potential mitigation strategies for the identified issues. 4. Developing a phased or pilot deployment plan that allows for testing and refinement. 5. Communicating the plan and potential risks to stakeholders. 6. Executing the plan with continuous monitoring and adjustment. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed, and the best possible outcome is achieved for the organization's security and operational stability. Question 20. Governance review demonstrates that during a critical security incident involving a widespread malware outbreak, the Symantec Endpoint Protection 12, one administrator took immediate steps to contain the threat. However, the review also highlighted a lack of detailed records regarding the specific actions performed on affected endpoints and the rationale behind certain configuration changes made to the SEP policies to mitigate the outbreak. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance requirements for incident response and system administration? Option A. Apply emergency patches and configuration changes directly to endpoints without prior logging, assuming that the critical nature of the incident supersedes standard documentation protocols. Option B. Perform immediate containment actions and rely on the administrator's memory to document the specific steps taken after the incident has been fully resolved. Option C. Implement rapid containment measures by disabling logging on affected endpoints to improve the speed of remediation and reduce the burden on system resources. Option D. Immediately initiate the incident response plan, ensuring all containment actions, policy modifications, and endpoint remediation steps are meticulously logged and auditable through Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1's reporting features. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate the incident response plan, ensuring all containment actions, policy modifications, and endpoint remediation steps are meticulously logged and auditable through Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. One's reporting features. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security administration, balancing operational efficiency with robust regulatory compliance. The administrator is tasked with responding to a critical security alert, while simultaneously ensuring that all actions taken are documented and auditable, as required by regulatory frameworks governing data protection and system integrity. The pressure of a live incident can lead to shortcuts that compromise compliance, making careful judgment and adherence to established procedures paramount. The challenge lies in the need for swift action, without sacrificing the integrity of audit trails and the adherence to mandated security policies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately initiating the incident response plan, which by definition includes detailed logging and documentation of all actions taken. This aligns directly with regulatory requirements for auditability and accountability. Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. One's logging capabilities are designed to capture critical event data, including policy changes, scan results, and threat detections. By leveraging these built-in features and ensuring their proper configuration and review, the administrator not only addresses the immediate threat, but also creates an irrefutable record that satisfies compliance mandates. This proactive documentation ensures that the organization can demonstrate due diligence and adherence to security best practices during an audit or investigation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a quick fix without documenting the steps taken is a significant regulatory failure. This bypasses the audit trail requirement, making it impossible to verify the actions performed, the rationale behind them, or their impact. Such an omission can lead to noncompliance with data protection regulations that mandate traceability of system changes and security events. Disabling logging to improve system performance during an incident is also a critical failure. While seemingly a pragmatic solution to a performance issue, it directly violates the principle of maintaining an auditable system. This action removes the evidence needed to investigate the incident thoroughly, understand its root cause, and demonstrate compliance with security monitoring requirements. It creates a blind spot that regulators would view with extreme suspicion. Relying solely on memory to recall actions taken after the incident is unprofessional and non-compliant. Regulatory frameworks require objective, verifiable evidence of system administration activities. Human memory is fallible and cannot serve as a substitute for documented logs and audit trails. This approach leaves the organization vulnerable to accusations of negligence and an inability to prove compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes both security and compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape, knowing the specific requirements for audit trails, incident response documentation, and data protection relevant to the organization's jurisdiction. 2. Adhering to established procedures, always following the organization's documented incident response plan and standard operating procedures for system administration. 3. Leveraging technology, utilizing the logging and reporting capabilities of security tools like Symantec Endpoint Protection 12. 1 to their fullest extent. 4. Prioritizing documentation, recognizing that every action taken, especially during an incident, must be logged and justified. 5. Continuous review, regularly reviewing logs and audit trails to ensure they are complete, accurate, and meet compliance standards.